The opening day of practice for the Austrian Grand Prix weekend has now concluded, with Mercedes dominating both sessions, led by Kimi Antonelli, and on the surface Ferrari do not appear to be anywhere close to challenging that pace. But I am here to tell you that this is not necessarily the full picture, because there has been a lot going on today that does not normally happen with both Mercedes and Ferrari. And in this video I will be breaking down exactly what Ferrari have been working on throughout the day and why the telemetry data from today, especially from Lewis Hamilton, indicates that there is still significantly more performance to come from the team heading into Saturday and Sunday. And to begin with, let's first go over their run plans across both FP1 and FP2, because before the weekend began it was widely believed that they would not introduce the new power unit, the AD01 engine, until Saturday morning in FP3, but it now appears very likely that they actually introduced it as early as FP1 and simply ran it in an extremely conservative mode, and you can clearly see this on screen through the telemetry comparison between Hamilton's and Banović's fastest laps in FP1, where it becomes immediately obvious that Hamilton gains most of his lap time advantage over Banović, specifically on the straights, and this is even while running a heavily detuned engine that is nowhere near being pushed to its maximum potential, and aside from that they were also conducting back-to-back tests on Banović's car both with and without the FTM, their flick tail module, not only with an eye on 2027 after it was confirmed today that it will be outlawed, but also in preparation for tracks like Spa and Monza, or possibly Spa and Silverstone, as they are expected to remove it for two of those upcoming race weekends. And of course FP2 was slightly more conventional, with both Leclerc and Hamilton in the car, although they were clearly struggling at times, which you could see both from the car's behavior during onboard shots throughout the session and from general trackside observations, as the car simply did not look like it was operating within its optimal performance window at all. But there is also another interesting factor to consider here, and that is shown in the graph on screen comparing Hamilton's quickest lap with Antonelli's session-topping FP2 time, where across all of the straights there is a significant difference between Ferrari and Mercedes, and what we are essentially looking at is the top speed of Antonelli compared directly to Hamilton, which highlights just how detuned Ferrari's engine was running, while also showing that, somewhat unusually, Mercedes were pushing their engine far more aggressively than they typically would on a Friday, and in the first sector you can see Antonelli reaching a top speed of 328 km per hour, with Hamilton about 5 km per hour slower, but the gap becomes even more pronounced in the second sector, where there is a 14 km per hour difference between Antonelli's 319 and Hamilton's figure, and then that trend continues into the final sector with Hamilton being another 9 km per hour slower, once again reinforcing the idea that Mercedes were pushing harder than usual while Ferrari were deliberately holding back more than usual. And this is a pattern that has been developing since Barcelona, where Ferrari have adopted a new approach of showing less of their true pace on Fridays and gradually building up performance across the weekend, as seen in Barcelona where the gap was around half a second in FP1, reduced to 0.2 by FP3, and then became extremely close in qualifying against Antonelli and Russell, and the same pattern appears to be unfolding again today with a larger gap in FP1, a smaller one in FP2, and an expectation that it will shrink even further in FP3 and especially in qualifying, indicating that Ferrari have clearly changed how they structure their practice sessions for reasons that are not entirely clear but are proving to be quite effective, and personally I am a fan of this approach. And looking ahead to FP3 and more importantly qualifying and the race, the key question is what Ferrari might still have in reserve for themselves and the rest of the field. And the first priority has to be resolving their balance issues, because the car currently looks extremely difficult to drive, particularly when compared to how stable and composed the Mercedes appears in the hands of Kimi Antonelli, and there is clearly a significant amount of lap time still available purely from improving that handling imbalance, and if they can successfully address that issue it should translate directly into performance gains. But there may also be an additional factor contributing to this situation, possibly related to the amount of fuel they are carrying in the car, which could further explain some of the behavior we have seen so far. They may be repeating the same approach they used in Barcelona, running significantly heavier fuel loads in both FP1 and FP2, and as a result, combined with the high track temperatures we have seen today, this could explain much of the behavior observed, and if they are able to resolve these factors, then performance should improve considerably, with lap time gains appearing across every phase of the lap including mid-corner, corner entry, corner exit, and especially on the straights once they finally turn their engine up to its full potential, and because of that I believe they could bring themselves into a competitive window where they are close to, or even directly challenging, not only Mercedes but potentially Max Verstappen as well with the newly upgraded RB22, although I still expect Ferrari to remain ahead of Red Bull regardless of how things unfold. But ultimately I think this weekend depends on a few key factors. Firstly, that they successfully fix the handling issues that are currently holding them back. Secondly, that the new engine is turned up to its maximum setting and delivers the straight-line speed improvement they need. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, that they retain their clear advantage in tire management, which is something that worked extremely well for them in Barcelona, and they will need that strength once again this weekend, especially with the race expected to be at least a 2-stop strategy and potentially even a 3-stop depending on how effectively teams are able to manage their tires. So these are the 3 critical elements to watch when evaluating Ferrari's performance, particularly starting with FP3 on Saturday, because if the car looks more stable and easier to handle, it will indicate that they have made the correct overnight adjustments and that things are beginning to return to normal in line with their revised run plan approach. But if I had to make a firm prediction, I would say that I do not fully expect Ferrari to produce the same level of turnaround that they achieved in Barcelona, as I simply do not see that happening based on what we have seen so far. I do think they will close the gap significantly, but I am not convinced they will be in a position to fight for the race victory, at least not from the current evidence available, although only time will truly tell whether that assessment proves accurate or whether it is overly pessimistic, because in my view a number of things still need to come together perfectly for that scenario to unfold. Anyway, everyone, I'm going to wrap up the video here. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you did, then make sure to leave a like, hit the subscribe button, join us here on F1 Tech Unraveled, and as always I will catch you all across the race weekend. See you then.